I'm off today, and I don't. Right now I'm working evenings Monday through Thursday.
Screaming kids.
So off today.
Well, I'm glad you're doing very good.
I think so. I think all in all we're pretty fortunate.
So how many years have you done it?
Well, this will be 13. And I've been quick.
Hey there. How are you guys? Happy birthday. Happy driving. He's gonna cry and I'll have to give him back in a minute. Babies don't like me. How are you? Good.
give me 45 points and Billy let give me 37. All five 25. It's 17. It's
And Marty had to go to a property and such ended up with it was losing second.
You know, chick from that tune of the
Yeah.
no, not T-Top.
I know, but that's
I'm actually already kind of wanting a new one.
Oh, you made me,
I'm so sorry.
made me go laugh my glasses off.
I haven't helped him because he's about to graduate from high school.
Good evening. Good evening. All right, go ahead and stand. And turn and love on each other for a bit. Paul, you don't have to stand if you don't want to. Turn and give some hugs and handshakes and high fives. Marty needs a hug. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I worship it's the light that looks like new day dawn. It's time to sing this song again. Whatever may pass and whatever before me. And maybe sing I will be Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Till like never before. Oh my soul. I worship Your holy name. Riches and Your slow to anger. Your name is great and Your heart is kind. Your wrongs are goodness and will keep on saving. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Till like never before. Oh my soul, I worship Your holy name. On my day, when my strength is failing, He was here and my time has come. Till my soul will sing Your praise unending. 10,000 years forever. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Till I never before. Oh my soul, I worship Your holy name. I worship Your holy name. I worship Your holy name. Sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, the peace we often this pain we bear. Oh, because we do not carry everything we got. Every trials and temptations that trouble anywhere. We should never be discouraged. Until you know we'll find the things of our sorrow share. Jesus knows whatever He's still alone. Lord, we need You every day. with the Lord. Precious Savior, still I'm with you. It's in the morning rain. This price will change. Take it to the morning plan. His arms are ready to shield me. Highest love is hand. Blessed Savior, thou hast promised. Now with all the burdens stand, may we have the Lord we bring. All forgiveness prayer. Soon is all in time and promise. There will be no need for them. Rapture, faith, and endless pleasure. Sweet worship. Father, we look forward to that day. We look forward to that day when we will be in your presence for all eternity, when what we see dimly right now, as through a cloudy mirror, one day we'll see face to face. When what we see now, kind of with hesitancy and uncertainty, one day we'll see completely clearly. God, we look forward to that day. But in the meantime, God, as we live life, there are things that we're concerned about, there are things we struggle with, and we need you to work in those situations. So God, I thank you that you are a God that we can be in relationship with. I thank you that you are a God that desires for us to come to and to bring our whole selves to, the good, the bad, and the ugly. God, I thank you that you are a God to whom we can cry out, and we can do so knowing that you will listen and that you will act and that you will work in our lives. So God, hear our hearts as we cry out to you. Work in our midst. Do what only you can do in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to go into a time of communion, and we're going to do so by breaking up into groups. We haven't done that for a few weeks. And so go ahead and get into groups of 3, 4, 5, something like that. And just share with each other some things that you want to pray about, some things that are maybe heavy on your heart, some people that you know that need God to work in their lives. Surely you know some people that need God to work in their lives. Even if you don't want to admit it's you, you know somebody that needs it. So pray for them, but ask, share with each other things that you want to pray about, and then spend time praying about those things. And then when you're done, go ahead and take communion together. Just send somebody up to get the tray. And take the body and the blood of Christ together. And then as it looks like everybody's getting close to me, then we'll sing one more song, okay, before we go into the Word of God. But go ahead and break up into groups and let's commune with each other and with the Father for the next little bit.
Wait, that's my Grammy, so I'll just give this to her. Oh, I can have both?
Yeah. You can one back there, I'll do the other one. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, $35 bill.
Make a big bow tie.
That baseball glove. Well, you don't get real warm and I'll be like,
Next day when you snow it, it's
oh,
freezing.
next day it's Steve on Next day it's real quiet.
So you think I should show well, I have to pray.
I have 97.
I just want to say, God, I'm not waiting.
My low is great for 97.
Way to brag. Just
Other eight was about a 164. I'm still trying to think of mine. There is an easier way. I'm not bad. Wait, is your name Betsy? Everyone says that, but it's the same amount of time off, so you might as well have some here and there. Have all of one point in the week if you're on my That's my opinion.
Like 3-week break, and then another 3-week break, and a 3-week break, and then summer break is like 2 or 3 weeks. The same age, and they have them all split up. I was but that's just I don't like.
Yeah, but on that first day of school, it hurt so much. It hurt so much more on that first day of school. Like, the day before the first day of school was like, oh, I don't know.
Actually, it's too bad.
It's not that
Seth Curry's not playing. Did you hear what happened to him? He got like he broke his leg, pulled his full ligament, broke that was 20 years old, and broke several of his feet. And he's been out for 3 weeks.
So yeah, he been
It's not, it's way worse. I'm a thick, I have no center drive.
I'm not tall enough. I'm not big enough.
Freaking cold coming. It's not tall, it's just wide.
I did not say that you were breaking.
Say no.
I could.
It started at the very tip.
Oh my God. Give him my tool.
He wasn't
And nobody takes it except text and dude, you have a you were scared. Okay? You can't. And when you break it, you run it. That way. And then when it comes free, fall over that. Is up and not down. It's false. I see you when I first go in. I don't want to get touchdown. Yeah, you probably won't be able to. How much everything do you have? They're gonna put a lot. They most likely
You don't know that.
how much play. Yeah, but you could be the only one that plays.
Yeah,
then how did he grow
I'm
up?
running in the game. One time, he like wasn't in the
Probably got already. But for a split second, oh my God. And then you remember when Devin kept trying to show up to that? He never. Oh, he was really true.
I'm not tall enough. I mean, I can catch the tips. They don't test the ability. They test the
Totally not true. How you call this dog?
yeah, but
But he can run and he can catch. He got like 3 interceptions in your ball and almost got 6 hits. Against KV. You know how good that is? But then he got hit really hard. No. Do you think Columbus will play safety? I don't think so. I think majority are like very strong. Yeah, but I think but I'm a kid. I don't let people fight that much. Unless I like and Ezra's like, and then Ezra's like, yeah, he's dude, if you look at
all decided that landing on the ground.
I remember when Chris we're doing that. I have the ball. And I come to tackle him. And try to control hard on the ground. I fall on top of him. He goes down so good. And he gets up. He's like, I tripped her. Just like that. I was sitting down with my left shoulder and his head was flying around.
Yeah, as long as you get down, count down. Doesn't matter how close it looks.
I hate falling. Oh, it's like flying fire. But it feels so good to get something. But it's such when you get a cheap shot. It's not fun.
More like from there to like here. No one ever does that.
Well, it was a lot bigger. It was a lot bigger. And then you got to run because an offense running back and linebackers, and then 2 on 2. And Tessa's like, oh, I just get down, walking full on like I get down and boom, trip, right on the right on the jet, so bad. And then Logan just tried to put that on the it's illegal and it's
I don't think mine's better.
When peace like a river, my way. When sorrows like sea billow roll, whatever my life, Thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should come, though trial should come, against past assurance Christ hath denied the helpless unseen, and hath shed his own blood for my soul. It is with my soul. It is well with my soul. My sin overwhelms on this glorious dawn. My sin not to depart like the Lord is nailed to the cross, and I praise the Lord, praise the Lord, my soul. Amen. Amen. You be seated.
All right. Go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 12. Well, first let me say this quick announcement. On Wednesday, when the teams were here and there was kind of snow and ice on the road, we had a little bit of a, I won't say a fender bender, it was more of a door bender out here when our neighbors were backing out of their driveway and they slid into the door of one of the kids' cars. So that being the case, in the course of that, the suggestion was made maybe if we couldn't park right behind their driveway.
That's where I park.
I saw that, and I wasn't going to call you out on it because you didn't do anything wrong. I'm going to tell you what I told the young lady this past Wednesday. You did nothing wrong. Having said that, our neighbors are very patient, the fact that we like cloud up the street every Sunday and then halfway on Wednesday. And so if that was the only request, maybe we could just not, which we're not blocking the driveway, but, so Paul, you did nothing wrong.
Do I need to go move?
No, you don't need to go move.
That's not.
No, that's
Just make sure I have a ride home.
Yes.
Oh, wait, I'm driving tonight. Make sure he's got a ride home.
She had another chance to leave. As she told that story, all of us were thinking of the times we've left our kids somewhere, but we've never left our. Probably not many have left their spouses somewhere, but
It's not even the first time.
Not even. Whew. It was a cold night at the Spring House that week. So anyway, that came to mind. If we could try to do that, it's not. I don't think it's a huge deal, but our neighbors are pretty patient with our parking situation. So yeah, Genesis 12. Now, to be honest, tonight's going to be a little bit odd because typically I take a passage of scripture and try to unpack it, and I'm not really going to do that tonight. There's not one passage of scripture we're going to unpack, and yet we're going to take a look at the whole Old Testament in 30 minutes or less, something like that. I know, right? But to get into that, of course, we need to start out with a story. And so my senior year in high school, I was not considered an athlete in school because if you were a basketball player, you weren't an athlete in Kentucky. Although I did play baseball for all my years of high school, and I ran cross country a couple of years. And my senior year, I ran cross country. My sister did as well, and it was her freshman year. And I don't know why I told you that about me, because this is really a story about her. But my sister, who was a freshman, that was a tumultuous year for her running cross country for 3 reasons. And they all surround, all of them kind of are around one particular girl on her team, who from this point forward we will refer to as the nemesis. Okay. Now, teammates are not supposed to be nemesises or nemesi or whatever the plural of that word is, but nevertheless, this girl was kind of my sister's nemesis for 3 reasons. First reason is the girl was just kind of verbally bullying towards my sister. Nothing that would get her in trouble, but she was kind of part of the in cool crowd. My sister was not. She was from that area. We were not. We were very, even though we'd lived there for 8 or 9 years at that point, we were very much outsiders. And she would use her kind of sphere of influence to make my sister's life a little miserable at times. And so not cool, right? So that was the first reason, just in general, that was kind of the climate of their relationship. The second reason was, it had to do with a boy. It always has to do with a boy, right? You saw it coming, Bob, didn't you? And it was actually, this guy was one of my friends. He was one of my classmates. He was in my wedding. But he would come up to our house and hang out with me and my brother at times. And as my sister got older, he would just periodically start flirting with her. And as what you would expect when an older guy is kind of flirting with a younger girl, she's going to develop a crush on this feller, which I wasn't real thrilled about. But she developed a little bit of a crush on him. And I was perfectly content for that crush to not be reciprocated. But what made it worse was this guy who was also on the cross-country team started dating this girl, the nemesis, which just was added salt to an open wound, right? So that was, and they became kind of the cross-country couple that year. And it was like, oh. So anyway, so that was the second reason. The third reason was at the first meet, my sister was the kind of the top runner on our team. And everybody kind of knew it. Now, she's a very good athlete. She was a very good runner. To be honest, cross country wasn't her best sport. She was more of a sprinter and a long jumper. She won state in long jump her junior year in high school, and went to college and ran track and in college. But she was still, even though cross country wasn't her main deal, she was still a very, very good runner, a long distance runner. And everyone knew she was the best runner in the team, and everyone expected her to be kind of in that number one spot. But for whatever reason, and I'm not sure what happened, at that first meet, the nemesis beat my sister. It wasn't by much. She just barely squeaked past her. But I don't know if my sister was having a bad day or what, but she got past my sister and beat her in that race. And, of course, just started running at the mouth. And it so got in my sister's head that my sister just can beat. She's very skilled at beating herself down. And with that situation, she just got down on herself to where there was no amount of encouragement encouraging words that I could say to her. She just got down on herself to where from that point, for the rest of the season, this girl not only beat her, but got to where she was beating her by 2 minutes a race, that's a lot. And she was just soundly beating her. And my sister had just kind of slunk into that, just kind of, this is my place in life type thing. Woe is me. And there was nothing I could do to pull her out of it. Okay, well, that's life now. High school will be over one day. And so we just kind of carried on with the season. Well, as the season progressed, the pressure started to come off my sister because, you can only rub it in so long. And after a while, if you're winning every race, there's nothing really to rub in anymore. That girl had kind of stepped into that number one spot. And my sister Patricia, she just kind of contented herself in the number two spot. And they were still the couple, the cross country couple was dating, but that became old news after a while. Who cares, And so we kind of settled into that. And when that happened, the pressure started to come off my sister's shoulders. Well, I noticed that she started closing that gap in the races. She started running faster and faster times. Well, we got to the last regular season meet, of the season. The next week was going to be regionals, at which point if you run well, you qualify for state. And at that last regular season meet, I went out on the course during the girls' race. I went out on the course to about kind of half mile from the finish line, maybe a quarter mile from the finish line, just to kind of catch her when she's coming to encourage her, kind of help be that last boost or whatnot. And so I'm waiting there, and the runners start to come by, and I see a red shirt, and it's the nemesis, and she comes by, and I'm like, yeah, she'd be meeting my sister. She was not high on my list. So anyway, but I couldn't, really let her know that I didn't like her. So anyway, so she comes by, and she's gassed. I can tell. I mean, she's running hard, and she's, she doesn't have a whole lot left, which is the way you're supposed to look at the end of a race. Well, about not 30 seconds later, my sister comes by, and she's like this. She's got a bounce in her step. She's got a smile on her face. She's like, hi, Timothy! She's waving, and I'm like, oh no, this is not cool. So anyway, I was instantly angry, and not even angry, determined. I was like, this ends today. Okay, so anyway, so we got done with that race, and I said, Patricia, I said, that was ridiculous. I said, you look like you were out on a Sunday afternoon jog at the end of a distance race. You should have been puking your guts up, and you were only 30 seconds behind the nemesis, and you had way more energy. You can beat her. There's no reason for you not to beat her. I said, so this is what's going to happen. Next week at regionals, you are going to, when that race takes off, you're going to attach yourself to her hip, and you're going to let her set the pace. You're going to run with her the whole way, and in the last 100 yards, you're going to take her. There's no way she can beat you in the last 100 yards, and you're going to take her in those last 100 yards. That's the plan. You can do this. You can do this. Champ, so all week long, on the way to the bathroom, or brush your teeth, I pass, I hate Champ. You're going to do it this week, Champ. You can do this. You know, all week long, I'm giving her these pep talks, kind of psyching her up. We get to the day of the race, and I still remember it was this blistery cold day. Our coach actually bought like packages of tube socks, you know, for us to put over our, you know, hands and, you know, forearms. I wore those tube socks for years afterwards, but nevertheless, but I still remember, they were good socks. Don't want to waste them. And, but I still remember when they lined up for the girls' race, and the way that the course was, it started out like this big field. The first 3/4 of a mile was around this huge field. And then they came up this hill, and then they ran into town a little bit, and then came back and finished. And so I positioned myself up kind of at the top of the hill so I could watch them run that first 3/4 mile, and then they would run right past me. I thought this is a good spot. So, you know, gun goes off, bang, and, you know, they take off, and, you know, the big herd, you know, 80 people or something like that. And if you've ever seen these races, you know, it's a big clump, and then it starts to spread out, and you kind of have the main clump, and then you have the leaders that kind of start to kind of take shape in the front. And then in this case, you know, we had this girl, Megan, I think was her name, from Owsley County, who was one of the best in the state. She's out in front, as she should be. And then, like, hundreds of yards in front of her is my sister, running like a jackrabbit with her tail end on fire. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think I did my job a little too well. She is running like she's never run before, and she's not going to be able to keep that up. So I thought, she's going to be in trouble. And sure enough, by the time she got to me, she was dying. I mean, she was just, could hardly keep it together. And I thought, holy cow, I don't know if this is going to happen. But when she got past me, when she came right past me, I said, when she catches you, stay on her hip, take her the last 100 yards. You can do this, come on, you can do this. So anyway, so they run into town, and then, so I'm staying in the same spot waiting for them to come back around, and I see the runners start to come around the corner, and they're starting to come, and I see a red jersey come around, and I look, and it's the nemesis. I'm like, oh my gosh. And just about the time, you know, I'm about to throw my hands up in the air like I just don't care, I look, and I see another red jersey come around the corner, and it's my sister like 10 feet behind her. And I'm like, oh, it is on. I'm like, it's happening. Right here, today, it's happening. So I see them coming out, like, yes, this is going to happen. So when they started to get a little closer, I went down the hill to where I was right at the spot where kind of the 100-yard marker, you know, to the last 100 yards, 100 meters, whatever. And so I'm there, and I see them coming down the hill, and my sister, she's just like 6-8 feet behind her. And as soon as they hit the concrete, I start screaming, like, God, you can do it! And she gets this look of determination in her face, and she just, with everything she's got left in her, which isn't much at that point, because she spent it all in that first 3/4 of a mile, she runs past this girl and takes her, and she beats her, and she qualifies for state. Yay! And like fireworks went off, and confetti shot off. I mean, never mind, they were like probably like 25th out of 80. But nevertheless, in that moment, it was the greatest victory, because all of a sudden, all of the wrongs of that season had been righted. The planets were in alignment. There is a God in the sky. He is just. And that girl, and of course, the nemesis came up to her and gave her a big hug and said, good job. And I'm thinking, yeah, right, whatever. You are not happy for, don't even pretend like you are. So anyways, I know. I still have issues. And the irony in all of this, the sweet irony in all of this is, one, my sister ran so hard that day in these horrible conditions that she got pneumonia. And so she couldn't run in the state meet the next week. But she didn't care, because she beat the nemesis, right? And the second thing is, that girl who is the nemesis has since become a follower of Jesus and is on staff at the mission where I grew up. And so it's kind of like, so she's a sister in Christ. So it's kind of like, dang it. It'd be so much easier to be mad at you if you weren't a sister in Christ, but I can't be mad at her because, you know, she's my sister now. But But nevertheless, in that moment, it was a sweet victory. But here's the thing: if I had videotaped that, and I had shown you a recording of that, and you had watched it, and you would look at that, and if you saw that play out, you would go, "Oh, cool," because what you would have seen was just one girl pass another in the last 100 yards, 100 meters, and you go, "Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah. Oh, cool." But what makes that moment significant, what makes that moment special, is because you know the story leading up to it, right? You know the context. You know what the significance of that moment, and the significance of that moment comes to the forefront because you know of all the events that led up to it. You know, sometimes when we look at a verse of Scripture, we open our Bible and we pull out this verse. And you'll hear people say, "What's your favorite verse of the Bible?" I always want to quote to them. It's like somewhere in 1 Kings or something like that, where Elijah is terrorized by like some teenagers, and they're calling him, and they're saying, "Go on up, bald head, and so he calls down curses in there, and some she-bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. I always want to tell them that verse. I'm like, that's my life verse. It's what gives me inspiration on bad days. So anyway, but that's what we do sometimes. We take a verse and we look at it and we say that's and we just look at that verse. And sometimes what we do is we take a verse and we look at it and we go, "Oh, cool," and we miss the significance of it because we don't know the story that leads up to it. We don't know the story that gives that verse meaning. So what I want to do is I want to tell you the story today. I want to tell you the story of the whole Old Testament. And we're not going to be here all night. But I want to shape that story for you, because what we're going to be doing in the weeks to come is we're going to be looking at some passages in Isaiah. And those passages in Isaiah are amazing passages of Scripture. But what makes them truly amazing is knowing the story and the significance of those passages become evident when we consider the story of all that God is wanting to do in the lives of his people and of the world. And so the story starts with this. It starts with God creating. And he creates the world. And he creates the planets. And he creates air. And he creates water. And he creates land. He creates plants and animals. And he creates light and darkness. And then at the pinnacle of his creation, he creates humanity. And when he creates humanity, it says he creates humanity in his image. And what it means by that is he creates humanity to be like him. And he gives us the job of taking care of this world as if he himself were taking care of this world. That's why he made us in his image, so that we would be his representatives, so we would reflect his will and intention in this place. And that works all fine and good if we do what he says. But if you're familiar with the Old Testament, that's not what happens. Humanity doesn't do what God tells them to do. They don't reflect his will and his intention. And so they do, in fact, they do the exact opposite of what he says. At some point, they do the exact opposite. And when that happens, sin enters the world. And it's not just kind of one individual bad choice. It's this powerful force of sin enters the world and attaches itself to humanity and becomes a part of us from that point on. Humanity is forever altered because sin enters the world at that point. And when that happens, the world begins to spin out of control. I mean, basically. In fact, it gets so bad, and this is the Bible kind of talks about this. Just a couple of chapters, spans a large span of time. But what we see is the world getting worse and worse and worse, to the point it gets so bad that God says, "I can't handle this anymore. I'm just going to wipe it all out and start over." It's kind of like playing a video game, and you get so messed up that you just decide to hit the reset button. Is what happens. And God decided to hit the reset button. So he said, "I'm going to wipe out the world. I'm going to send this flood, wipe out everything, except for one man and his family, because they're righteous and they do listen to me. And I'm going to start again with them." So that's what he does. He starts again with them. The problem is that sin was still a part of humanity. And so, they do all right. They do pretty well. But pretty soon, them and their descendants, sin is a part of us now. And again, the world starts to spin out of control. And the world gets completely sinful once again. And so the question is, how do you fix that? When God had created the world to be one way, and now sin is a part of the equation, and it's destroying everything. How do you fix that? And what God comes up with, the plan that God comes up with, is he chooses a man. He chooses a man named Abram, later called Abraham. Excuse me, given the name of Abraham. And he decides, I'm going to come to him, and I'm going to give him some promises, and I'm going to choose to work through him and through his descendants to get this thing back on track. And so in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, it says this: the Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you, and I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So that was the plan. That was the solution. That God was going to start with him to this problem of sin, that God decided, I'm going to bless this man and his family, and through them, everyone is going to be blessed. That's how we're going to get this thing back on track. And so that's what he starts to do. And so if you follow the story from there on, it continues moving, and you see the exploits of Abraham and Sarah, and they have their son Isaac, and then Isaac gets married, and he has Esau and Jacob, and Jacob, who later is renamed Israel, he has 12 sons. He also has a daughter, but in that culture, daughters didn't count as much. I'm sorry, Ali. It's just the way it was. It's terrible. But nevertheless, he had 12 sons, and those 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel. And as a family, they start to multiply, and they find themselves down in Egypt. And at first, that's not a bad deal, but eventually they multiply so much that the king of Egypt enslaves them, and God has to set them free from that. And he does that with some powerful acts of deliverance and sets them free and brings them out of there. And he gives them his commandments, and he gives them his law, and he begins to shape them as a people. And he takes them into the land that he promised them. And he brings them in there, and he establishes them as a people. And so they are a people. They're a great nation. They have the commandments. They're in the land where they're supposed to go. And so everything's kind of happening, and yet as it's supposed to happen, and yet you see it's still a problem because sin is still a part of the equation. And you see them disobeying God, and they disobey him, and they get themselves in a bad spot, and God has to rescue them, and then they disobey God, and get themselves in a bad spot, and God has to rescue them, and this goes on and on and on. And so they think, hey, you know what the solution is? We need a king. And God says, no, that's not the solution. They're like, yeah, that's what we want. And God's like, okay, that's not the solution, but I'll give you a king. So he gives them Saul, and Saul doesn't turn out so well, so then he gives them David, and David, while he makes some major mistakes, continues to seek God. And so God blesses David, and he blesses the nation, and the nation becomes strong. And then David's son Solomon takes over, and he starts out really well, and the nation becomes even stronger. But then Solomon begins to kind of turn his back on God and do things he shouldn't be doing. And by the time Solomon's son takes over, because Solomon has died, he has the nation is in kind of a tense spot, and he has a key decision to make. And as it says in Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade, he chose poorly. And he made a bad choice. And when that happened, the nation split. And this is key. The nation split. The 10 northern tribes became the nation of, they are referred to as Israel, or Northern Israel, as I a lot of times call them. The 10 northern tribes of Israel. And the southern 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, are referred to as Judah. And so there's a split there. So the people of God are split. You can read about that in 1 Kings and 2 Kings. You can read about it in some of the prophets. And sometimes the prophets are sent to Israel. Sometimes the prophets are sent to Judah. But they're split. And so you see them kind of interact with each other. And from that point on, Judah kind of does well a lot of times and then does poorly at other times. Israel kind of goes bad from the start. They turn their back on God, and they hardly follow him at all. And so they maintain their identity for a couple hundred years. But then because of their disobedience, God allows Assyria, the nation of Assyria, to conquer them. And when Assyria conquers them, they basically are forced to intermarry, and they are just they lose their identity as a nation. They're kind of wiped out, so to speak. But Judah's still going. And so the promise is still alive, right? The people of God are still alive, and God's continuing to work through them. But Judah starts to make some bad choices as well. And it gets to where it's so bad to where God eventually allows Babylon to conquer Judah. But the difference is when Babylon conquers Judah, they don't wipe them out. They transport them to Babylon, and they allow them to exist as their own people within Babylon in exile. But Jerusalem's destroyed, the temple's destroyed. They're shipped away from their homeland. And they stay there for about 50 years, something like that. Well, then God raises up the Persians, and the king of Persia, Cyrus, says, hey, you know what? I'm going to let you guys go back. And so some of them go back. And over the course of like 20 years, they rebuild the temple. And then over the course of a couple hundred years, they reform their identity as the people of God. And they never achieve the same greatness, but they figure out, they start to form their identity as the people of God once again. And it's at that point, a couple hundred years later, that Jesus enters the scene. Now here's the thing. Why do you need to know all that? Well, or why do you need to have that scope and that picture in your brain? Well, this is why. We're going to be looking at some key passages in Isaiah, as I said. And there are really two key parts to the book of Isaiah. It divides into two sections. You have chapters 1 through 39, which is a message. It's Isaiah talking to southern Judah during the time when northern Israel is about to kind of get their rear ends kicked, and that they're about to be overtaken by the Assyrians. He starts prophesying about 20 years before that happens, and he continues prophesying for about 40 years over it. So he kind of straddles that time of when Israel is destroyed. And so his message is to Judah as they're watching these events unfold. And so he's interpreting these events for the people of Judah. And so that's what chapters 1 through 39 are for. But chapter 40, there is a distinct change in the book of Isaiah. It's so strong, in fact, some scholars think that someone else wrote it, the second half of Isaiah. Other scholars, which I tend to agree with them, not that my vote matters, but that it's just that God has revealed, God is still communicating through the same individual, but he is prophetically looking forward 140 years, and God is giving him a vision to see what's going to unfold, okay? But what happens is Isaiah is given a vision to see of what's going to happen to Judah, that they are going to be sinful, that they are going to rebel against God, that God's going to allow them to be overtaken, that he's going to send them into exile, and then eventually they're going to be released. And so he writes this prophecy, these chapters 40 through 66, as a message of hope to the Jews during this time when they are in exile. Okay? He's anticipating that, and he's writing this message to them. And here's the deal. When he writes this message to them, he knows what's going to happen to them. And he's giving them this message of hope. And the question that he really wrestles with, that he knows is going to be on their minds and hearts, is God still faithful to his promises? I mean, God said he was going to bless us. God said he was going to make us into a great nation. God said he was going to work through us. And God said he was going to bring through us, he was going to bring blessing to the whole world. But how can that still happen if we're in exile? If we've been taken away from our homeland? Is that promise still on the table? And so Isaiah is answering that question and giving them a message of hope and saying, God's not done with you. I mean, if you look at chapter 40, the first words are comfort to my people. Your sin, your time of sin, your sins have been paid for. Your time of exile is over. Your time of punishment is over. It's this message of hope to them. And so he's answering this, and he goes on to talk about how God's going to rescue you out of here, and he's going to raise up Cyrus, and Cyrus is going to let you guys go back, and he's going to do a mighty work. And so there's this message of hope there, answering the question that, yes, you guys will be a people again. But as he thinks through that question, that problem of how do we get back on track being who we're supposed to be, he lets his mind go even further, because it's like he begins to realize, the real problem isn't that we're not that you won't be back in Jerusalem. The real problem isn't that the temple was destroyed. The real problem isn't that you're in exile. As long as you could get back to Jerusalem, back to the temple, back out of exile, everything would be fine. That's not the problem, and that's not the ultimate solution. The problem is the sin that got you into this fix in the first place. That is the problem. And the question is, what are we going to do about that? What are we going to do about that? And as he talks about that, he begins to focus on on someone that he refers to as the servant. And oftentimes as he talks about the servant, he talks about it in such a way that he's referring to Israel, that Israel as a whole, the people of God as a whole, are referred to as a servant. But every once in a while, the way he focuses in on the servant, it becomes apparent that he's not just talking about the nation, the people of God as a whole. He's talking about an individual who will represent those people and who will be faithful in a way that those people have not been and can't be. Because that's part of the problem. If the job of the people of God is to bring God's blessing to the whole world, what happened to fix this problem of sin? What happens when the people who are supposed to be part of the solution are part of the problem? What do you do about that? And so what Isaiah begins to see is what we need, what God needs to send is someone who will be what we can't be. And he starts to refer to this person as his servant. And in fact, there are 4 places in Isaiah 40 through 66 where Isaiah talks about the servant of God. And in fact, they're called the servant songs. There's 4 of them. And we're going to look at those. We're going to look at those servant songs, those 4 suffering servant songs over the next 8 weeks leading up to Easter is what we're going to be looking at. And to give us this picture of what God, the plan that God had in mind from the very beginning to solve this problem of sin, and the realization that the promises that he made to Abraham, that he was going to be faithful to those promises in a way that they never could have anticipated. Because the people of God themselves couldn't stay faithful to it the way they needed to be stay faithful to it. And so there needed to be a person who could do that. And so he just starts to describe that person. And the thing is, we believe we know who that person is. That person is the person of Jesus. But the cool thing is Isaiah is talking about him 700 years before his feet ever hit the ground. And it's incredible when you start to think of it that way. That he starts to paint a picture of who God's servant was going to be. Hundreds of years before he even graced our presence. And that picture it's a powerful thing when we start considering. In fact, that idea has captured our culture. In fact, if you are into fantasy books or movies at all, that theme comes up all the time of the prophecy surrounding a chosen one, right? I mean, you see it in the Star Wars movies, you see it in the Matrix movies, if there's any Matrix fans out there, you saw it in the Chronicles of Narnia, you saw it there. I just got done this week, finished reading for the second time, the 6th book of the Harry Potter series. And that one is all about speculating. Yeah, right. Harry Potter fan back there. And the 6th book is all about the prophecy that has been made. And is Harry the chosen one? And everyone thinks he is, which is why now he's a hit at school with all the girls. Romilda Vane really has the hot for Harry because she thinks he's the chosen one. And Hermione's really mad at Harry because she said she only wants to go out with you because she thinks you're the chosen one. And Harry's like, well, I am the chosen one. So it's okay, right? No, anyway, excuse me. But that idea is all through literature and it's all through movies. But they get that idea from here because this really happened. That Isaiah saw this hundreds of years before Jesus ever came. And as he draws that picture of who the servant was, it gives us a picture of the one that we're called to serve and to love. But we start to see that way before he ever came on the scene. So what do we need to do with this? What do we need to do with this for today? Here's what I would say. We need to start thinking through the problems of our own lives. We need to start thinking through the problems of our lives and the solutions that we're wanting. Because we all have stuff. We all have stuff that we want God to work in. And our thought is, okay, this is a problem. And if only this solution would happen, everything would be fine. It might be, I have a financial problem, and if I only had this amount of money, the solution would be fixed. Or I have a cruddy job, and if only I could get a different job, then that's the solution I need. Or we're having this problem in my family, and if only this would be fixed, everything would be fine. And we all have something. But the challenge of Isaiah, of the example that we see in Isaiah as a whole, and I hope will become more evident as we look at these servant songs, is to look and to think deeper into our lives. Because just like the problem of the people of God wasn't just that they needed to get back to their homeland, the problem was that God needed to deal with the sin that was attached to them. In the same way, the problem isn't just that we have these things that need to be fixed and we need whatever solution we can speculate. The problem is that there is some sin in our lives that has caused us to get into some of those fixes in the first place. And God wants to deal with those things in us. And just as the suffering servant of Jesus was the solution to the problems for the people of God, it's the solution to us for us as well. And he is the answer. He is the one through whom all the nations of the earth will be blessed. He is the one that can set right what has been made wrong. He is the one that can get this thing back on track. He is the one that is the answer to the problem of sin that God started to put back on track when he came and talked to Abraham and said, I'm going to bless you, I'm going to make you a great nation, and through you, all the nations of the world will be blessed. Everyone will be blessed through you. And that comes channeled through the person of Jesus. He's the fulfillment of that. And that is the answer to the problem of sin that all of us struggle with. And so I think the challenge of it is to look deeper. What in us needs to be fixed? Not just the little problems that we see that might feel like big problems, but the deeper issues in those big problems. Where has sin attached itself to our lives? And we need the suffering servant to come and eradicate it from us and to set us free from that. You know, I can't remember if I shared this or not, but everybody has their own conversion story or testimony stories. One of my own personal testimony stories, it wasn't my conversion, but it was when I fell in love with the Word of God for the first time. Just fell in love with it, and I still remember it. It was at a spring revival. I was in my freshman year, and we had an old codger that was coming to preach at our church in the middle of nowhere. His name is Dr. Dennis Kimmel. He had been the president of Asbury College for some time. He was a Hebrew professor at Asbury Seminary. Not what you would typically think as a teen evangelist. And he wasn't there to do a teen service. He was just there to do the revival service at my church. And I didn't want to go. And we had a baseball game that night. Because I remember I was in my baseball uniform, so I was pretty excited that I wasn't going to have to go. But as is typical for my baseball team, we were so bad that we lost very fast. And we lost in time for us to get to the revival. I was like, God, you couldn't have strung it out, any longer. And so we go to revival, and I'm sitting there in my cleats and in my baseball uniform, sitting on the back row, not wanting to be there. And the guy gets up to preach, and he starts preaching from the book of Isaiah. Not one of the passages we're going to look at, but just a few verses more, dealing with some of the same things. And he starts to preach from a section in the book of Isaiah, talking about the arm of the Lord, another term Isaiah uses to refer to the Messiah, to the suffering servant. And as he talked about it, I just remember my heart catching on fire and just something exploding inside of me as he unpacked Isaiah to me. And my prayer is that is what will happen to us too, as we look at Jesus through the lens of someone who lived 700 years before Jesus. And I think that might happen because Isaiah has a history of doing that. That's what happened in the book of Acts, if you remember, when Philip goes and talks to the Ethiopian eunuch, and the Ethiopian eunuch's reading somewhere, he's reading out of the book of Isaiah. And he says, actually one of the passages we're going to look at, he says, is he talking about himself? Is he talking about somebody else? And Philip's just like, let me tell you about who he's talking about. And he starts to tell him about Jesus. And at the end of Luke, when the disciples on the Emmaus Road are trying to understand what's going on, and Jesus comes up and stands with them, but they don't know it's Jesus. And they're bemoaning what has happened, and he starts to talk to them again. And he tells them the story from the Old Testament. You can bet your buttons that he spent a lot of time in Isaiah. And when they described it, they said, didn't our hearts burn when he talked to us on the road? Isaiah has that way, and my hope is that when we look at these passages of the suffering servant, that we will fall in love with Jesus even more than we have before. Because we're seeing it through the lens of a guy who lived 700 years before him and yet knew what the world needed. Because we all have the same problem, and that is sin. And we all need saving from that. So let's pray. God, I pray that you will make your word come alive to us in the weeks and the months to come. That you'll help us to understand the vision of your Son that was given to Isaiah. And God, I pray that we, as we read his words and as we try to internalize his words, God, I pray that you help us understand them. I pray that you help us understand them in their context. I pray that you help us understand them in the story of faith as a whole. But most of all, Lord, I pray that you help us to see Jesus in a new way. I pray that you help us to understand Jesus in a new way. And I pray that you help us to fall in love with Jesus more than we ever have before, and that our lives will be different as a result. God, speak to us through your messenger, Isaiah. Make his prophecy come alive to us even now. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Go ahead and stand as we sing one more song.
That's everything. Rescue from sin, risen from heaven, Jesus Messiah. His blood of wine, let it pour down all through the whole earth trembled when the veil was torn down. What's so amazing? What's so amazing? Jesus Messiah. Blessed is he, rescue from sin, ransom from heaven, Jesus Messiah. Jesus Messiah, in a Bible, blessed Redeemer, rescue from sin, ransom from heaven, Jesus Messiah, Lord and Lord. Jesus Messiah, Lord of all. Jesus Messiah, Lord of all. God, we thank you that you are. Jesus, we thank you that you are. We thank you for what you have done for us. Help us to learn more of what you have done. Help us to learn more of who you are. Help us to love you more as a result. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a great week. Love on each other. Eat.